Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm E.Mallery, and I love diving into captivating stories that tug at the heartstrings and inspire us all. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss any of my storytelling adventures. Today, we're stepping into the emotional and unforgettable world of the story of Orphan Ashley. This is a tale of resilience, hope, and the unbreakable human spirit as we follow Ashley, a young orphan, on her journey through loss, discovery, and the search for belonging. Will she find the family she's always dreamed of, or will the challenges of her past hold her back? Stick around, this story might just become your next favorite. Before we dive in, drop a like if you're excited to hear about Ashley's journey, and let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Let's get started. Chapter 1. A Child of Ashes. In the gray dawn of a bitter Boston winter, the heavy oak door of St. Mary's Orphanage creaked open to reveal a sight that would linger in Sister Margaret's memory for years. There, on the frostbitten stone step, sat a child, no more than 3 years old, her small frame trembling beneath a tattered dress, the edges singed black as if kissed by flame, her wide, frightened eyes, a deep hazel that seemed to hold 1,000 unspoken questions, peered up at the nun with a mixture of fear and weary resignation. Clutched in her tiny, chapped hands was a blanket, its corners charred and fraying, wrapping her like a shroud against the biting wind. Sister Margaret's breath caught in her throat as she knelt, her habit brushing the icy ground, and gathered the girl into her arms. "Dear Lord, who are you, little one?" she whispered, though she knew no answer would come. The child, later named Mary by the nuns for lack of any other identity, bore no mark of family or origin save for 2 haunting relics. Around her delicate neck hung a small, tarnished locket, its clasp stiff with age. When Sister Margaret pried it open, she found only an empty frame where a photograph should have been, a void as mysterious as the girl herself. Tucked within the blanket, however, was a scrap of paper, its edges curled and darkened by fire. The handwriting was frantic, scrawled in haste. "My name is Ashley. Fire took the house. Everyone dead. Save her." The words sent a chill through the nun's bones, colder than the February air. She pressed the note to her chest as if to shield the child from its cruel finality, and carried her inside the orphanage's damp, echoing halls. Within those stone walls, questions swirled like the snow outside. Where had this girl come from? Whose child was she? The singed blanket and dress hinted at a tragedy too terrible to fathom, a blaze that had consumed her world and left her as its sole survivor. The nuns whispered among themselves, piecing together fragments of a story they could never fully know. Perhaps she was the daughter of a merchant family, caught in a tenement inferno. Or maybe a farmer's child, lost to a barn fire on the city's outskirts. No one came forward to claim her, no frantic parent or distant kin, and the locket's empty frame offered no clue. Ashley, as they called her, became a mystery wrapped in ash, a child of no one, belonging only to the cold mercy of St. Mary's. That first night, as Sister Margaret tucked her into a narrow cot in the dormitory, the girl's small hand clung to the locket, her only tether to a past she could not name. The other children, pale and hollow-eyed from their own losses, stared at her with a mix of curiosity and indifference, their whispers rustling like dry leaves. Ashley did not cry, though her lips trembled, and her gaze darted to the shadowed corners of the room, as if expecting someone to emerge from the dark. Sister Margaret lingered by her side longer than she should have, murmuring prayers for a soul so young to bear such weight. "You're safe now, child," she said, though the words felt hollow against the orphanage's chill, a place where safety was as fleeting as warmth. In the days that followed, Ashley remained a quiet, watchful presence, her beauty striking even through the grime of her arrival. Her chestnut hair, though tangled and matted, framed a face of delicate features, and those hazel eyes seemed to see beyond the gray walls that confined her. Yet fear clung to her like a second skin, evident in the way she flinched at sudden noises or shrank from the older children's rough play. The nuns, though kind in their way, could offer little beyond bread and prayer, their resources stretched thin by the dozens of lost souls under their care. Ashley's story, or the lack of it, became a quiet ache in their hearts, a reminder of the countless tragedies that filled their halls. And so, on that doorstep, in the fading light of a winter's day in 1892, Ashley Norman's life began anew, or perhaps simply began to endure. The singed blanket was folded away in a trunk, the note preserved as a somber relic, and the locket remained around her neck, a silent question mark against her chest. She was a child of ashes, born from a fire she could not remember, left to grow in a place as cold as the embers of her past. What lay ahead for her, no one could say, but in her small, shivering form, there flickered a spark of something unyielding, a strength that even the darkest flames could not consume. Chapter 2. The Gray Walls of Childhood. The years slipped by within the somber confines of St. Mary's Orphanage, each day blending into the next like the gray drizzle that perpetually coated Boston's cobblestone streets. For Ashley Norman, now a girl of 15, the cold, damp walls of the institution had become the only world she knew. The orphanage was a fortress of stone and routine, its halls echoing with the shuffle of worn shoes and the murmur of prayers at dawn. Life here was a humdrum existence, marked by the clanging of the breakfast bell, the endless scrubbing of floors, and the faint, ever-present chill that seeped into her bones no matter how tightly she wrapped her threadbare shawl. Yet within this bleakness, Ashley carved out a space for herself, her spirit as resilient as the ivy clinging to the orphanage's crumbling exterior. The daily grind was both a burden and a strange comfort. Mornings began with chores, hauling buckets of water from the well, peeling potatoes in the drafty kitchen, or mending the younger children's tattered clothes with clumsy stitches. The nuns, stern but not unkind, enforced discipline with a ruler's sharp tap and a litany of rules meant to instill order in their chaotic flock. Ashley, with her quiet demeanor and quick hands, often escaped their harshest scrutiny. She was a proper girl, or so they said, her posture straight and her words measured, even when hunger gnawed at her belly or exhaustion weighed on her slight frame. But beneath her composed exterior burned a mind hungry for more than the orphanage could offer. In the rare stolen moments of peace, she would slip into the small library, a cramped room with sagging shelves, and lose herself in tattered books about the wild, untamed West. Tales of cowboys, vast prairies, and daring escapes filled her with a longing she could scarcely name, a dream of a life beyond the gray walls that hemmed her in. Friendships, though hard-won, became her lifeline. There was Eliza, a wiry girl with a sharp tongue and a knack for sneaking extra bread from the kitchen, who taught Ashley how to laugh even on the darkest days. Together they whispered secrets under the thin blankets of their dormitory cots, dreaming of families they might one day find. Then there was Thomas, a gentle boy a year younger, whose stutter made him a target for mockery, but whose kindness shone through in the way he shared his meager portion of soup when Ashley fell ill one bitter winter. These bonds, forged in shared hardship, were as precious to her as the locket she still wore, its empty frame a constant reminder of a past she could not grasp. But not all her companions were allies. Margaret, a tall, sour-faced girl with a cruel streak, took every opportunity to belittle Ashley, mocking her quiet ways and spreading whispers that she was cursed, born of fire and doom. Her taunts stung, but Ashley learned to swallow her hurt, her hazel eyes hardening with each barb, her resolve growing like a shield. The orphanage was not without its small joys, fleeting though they were. On Sundays, after the long church service, the children were sometimes allowed to play in the muddy courtyard, their shouts of laughter a rare defiance against the gloom. Ashley cherished these moments, even as she felt the weight of her difference, her unknown origins setting her apart from those who at least had fragments of memory to cling to. She often stood at the edge of the yard, watching the younger ones chase each other, her thoughts drifting to the note tucked away in the nuns' records. Fire took the house, everyone dead. The words haunted her, a riddle she turned over in her mind during the long, sleepless nights. Who had written it? What house had burned? The questions gnawed at her, as persistent as the damp that stained the walls. By 15, Ashley had grown into a striking young woman, her chestnut hair now neatly braided, her delicate features sharpened by years of want. Her beauty drew notice, though she scarcely cared for it, more concerned with the strength she felt building within her. She was smart, the nuns admitted, her mind quick to grasp the lessons they taught, arithmetic, scripture, and the few scraps of history they deemed fit for orphans. But her love for stories of the West remained her truest education, fueling dreams of wide-open spaces where she might finally belong. She imagined herself riding across endless plains, free from the orphanage's suffocating routine, though she knew such dreams were as distant as the stars she glimpsed through the dormitory's cracked window. Yet, as the years wore on, a quiet restlessness took root. St. Mary's, for all its familiarity, was a cage, and Ashley felt its bars more keenly with each passing day. The other children came and went, some adopted by families seeking labor or companionship, others aging out to face the harsh world alone. Ashley watched them leave with a mix of envy and dread, wondering what fate awaited her. Would she, too, be chosen? Or would she remain here, a ghost among the gray walls, until time itself forgot her? The locket around her neck felt heavier with each unanswered year, its empty frame a mirror to the void in her heart. But deep within, that unyielding spark, born on a frostbitten doorstep 12 years ago, still flickered, whispering that her story was far from over. Chapter 3. A New Family, a New Burden. The spring of Ashley Norman's 15th year brought with it a change as sudden and unexpected as a thunderstorm on a clear day. One damp April morning, Sister Margaret called her to the orphanage's small, drafty office, where the air smelled of old parchment and candle wax. The nun's lined face, usually stern, softened with something like relief as she announced that a family had chosen to adopt Ashley. William and Cora Hensley, a well-to-do couple from a farm just outside Boston, sought a strong, capable girl to help with their household and land. They had 2 younger children, Sister Margaret explained, and Cora's health had taken a turn, leaving them in need of extra hands. Ashley stood silent, her heart a tumult of hope and uncertainty, as she clutched the locket at her throat. A family, something she had dreamed of in the quietest corners of her mind, was now a reality, yet the weight of being needed rather than wanted pressed heavily on her shoulders. The journey to the Hensley farm was a blur of new sights and sounds. Ashley rode in the back of a creaking wagon, her few belongings, a patched dress, a worn shawl, and her precious books about the West, bundled in a sack at her feet. William Hensley, a broad-shouldered man with a weathered face and kind, tired eyes, drove the team of horses, offering her a gruff but genuine welcome. Beside him sat Cora, a frail woman whose pale skin and frequent coughs betrayed her illness, though her smile was warm as she reached back to pat Ashley's hand. The younger children, a boy of 6 named Samuel and a girl of 4 called Hannah, peered at her with wide-eyed curiosity from their mother's lap. Ashley managed a small smile in return, though her stomach churned with nerves. The city's gray sprawl gave way to rolling fields and the earthy scent of tilled soil, a world so different from St. Mary's stone walls that it felt like stepping into one of her stories. The Hensley farm was a sturdy, sprawling place, its whitewashed house flanked by a weathered barn and acres of land dotted with grazing cows and neat rows of crops. Ashley's first impression was one of awe at the sheer openness of it all. The sky seemed endless, unmarred by the orphanage's looming shadows. But the beauty came with a price. From the moment she arrived, her days were filled with labor that tested her endurance in ways even St. Mary's had not. There were chickens to feed, cows to milk, and endless buckets of water to haul from the well. Inside, the house demanded just as much, sweeping floors, scrubbing pots, and tending to Samuel and Hannah while Cora rested in her rocking chair, her strength sapped by a lingering ailment the family did not name. William worked the fields from dawn to dusk, his presence a steady but distant anchor, leaving Ashley to shoulder much of the domestic burden. Despite the toil, there were moments of warmth that eased the ache in her muscles and heart. Cora, though weak, had a gentle way about her, often calling Ashley to sit by her side in the evenings to share stories of her own childhood on a farm much like this one. Her voice, though raspy, carried a tenderness that reminded Ashley of Sister Margaret on her kinder days. Samuel and Hannah, once their shyness faded, became her shadows, tugging at her apron with sticky fingers and begging for tales of cowboys and Indians from her books. Ashley obliged, her voice weaving the Wild West into the quiet parlor, finding a flicker of joy in their delighted gasps. William, too, showed his gratitude in small ways, a nod of approval when she managed to mend a broken fence, or an extra helping of stew at supper, his quiet acknowledgement speaking louder than words. Yet the weight of her role as helper rather than daughter was a constant undercurrent. Ashley felt the unspoken expectation in every task, the knowledge that her place here was earned through sweat rather than love. Cora's illness cast a shadow over the household, her coughs echoing through the thin walls at night, a reminder of how fragile this new life was. Ashley often lay awake in her small attic room, the straw mattress prickling her skin, wondering if she could ever truly belong here. The locket around her neck felt heavier in those moments, its empty frame a mirror to the uncertainty of her future. She missed Eliza's sharp laughter and Thomas's quiet kindness from the orphanage, though she dared not admit how often her thoughts drifted back to those gray walls, now a memory tinged with both pain and strange comfort. As spring turned to summer, Ashley's hands grew calloused, her frame leaner from the endless work, but her spirit adapted with the same resilience that had carried her through St. Mary's. She learned the rhythm of farm life, the early mornings, the ache of a long day, the satisfaction of a task well done. She began to see the Hensleys not just as employers but as a makeshift family, their reliance on her a tether that, while heavy, gave her purpose. Yet, beneath it all, a quiet longing persisted, for answers to the mystery of her past, for a place where she was more than a pair of helping hands. The vast fields around her echoed the dreams of the West she still harbored, whispering of a freedom she could not yet grasp. For now, though, she poured her strength into the farm, unaware of the storm that loomed on the horizon, ready to upend the fragile stability she had begun to build. Chapter 4. Shadows of the Past. The late summer air hung heavy with the scent of hay and impending harvest as Ashley settled into her routine at the Hensley farm. The days were long, filled with the familiar ache of labor, but she had begun to find a quiet rhythm in the endless tasks. Milking the cows at dawn, tending to the vegetable patch, and soothing Hannah's scraped knees with a damp cloth. It was a life of toil, but also of small, hard-won comforts, like Cora's grateful smile or William's rare, approving grunt. Yet, on a humid August night, as crickets chirped outside her attic window, that fragile peace shattered in a way Ashley could never have foreseen. She awoke to the creak of floorboards, a sound too deliberate to be the house settling. Her small room, lit only by a sliver of moonlight, felt suddenly suffocating as a shadow loomed in the doorway. Before she could cry out, a rough hand clamped over her mouth, the scent of sweat and tobacco overwhelming her senses. "Don't scream, girl. I ain't here to hurt ya." A low, gravelly voice rasped, the words laced with an urgency that sent her heart pounding. In the dim light she saw a man, tall, gaunt, with a weathered face half hidden by a scruffy beard. His eyes, a piercing hazel eerily like her own, bore into hers with a mix of desperation and something she couldn't name. Panic surged through her as he pulled her from the bed, her bare feet cold against the wooden floor, and bundled her into a coarse blanket. "We gotta go. Now," he muttered, dragging her toward the window he'd pried open, the night air rushing in like a slap. Ashley's mind raced as she stumbled behind him, too stunned to resist fully, though her body tensed with every instinct to fight. Who was this man? A thief? A madman? The Hensleys slept downstairs, oblivious, and the thought of Samuel and Hannah's innocent faces spurred a fleeting urge to scream, but his grip on her arm was iron, his whispered warnings, "I'm saving you, trust me," only deepening her confusion. He led her through the fields, away from the farmhouse, to a waiting horse tethered near the tree line. With a grunt, he hoisted her onto the animal's back, mounting behind her, and spurred it into a gallop. The farm receded into the darkness, the familiar shapes of barn and home swallowed by the night, leaving Ashley with nothing but the thud of hooves and the chilling realization that she was being taken, kidnapped, from the only stability she'd known since St. Mary's. They rode for what felt like hours, the man's silence broken only by occasional mutters to the horse or gruff reassurances that she'd understand soon enough. Ashley's fear mingled with a growing numbness, her thoughts a tangle of dread and questions. Her thin nightdress offered little protection against the cool night air, and the blanket he'd wrapped her in smelled of damp earth and smoke, stirring a vague, unsettling memory she couldn't place. When they finally stopped at a small, hidden clearing miles from the farm, dawn was just beginning to streak the sky with pale gold. The man dismounted, helping her down with surprising gentleness, though his hands trembled as he did so. Up close, in the faint light, she saw the lines of hardship etched into his face, the hollows under his eyes speaking of a life as rough as the calluses on his palms. "I know you're scared, and I'm sorry for it," he said at last, his voice softer now, raw with emotion. "But I couldn't leave you there, not when I finally found you. My name's Ash Norman. I'm your father, girl. Thought you was gone, burned up with the rest of 'em, till I heard otherwise." His words hit her like a physical blow, stealing the breath from her lungs. "Father?" The word echoed in her mind, impossible, a cruel jest. She stared at him, searching his face for lies. But those hazel eyes, so like the ones she saw in the cracked mirror at the orphanage, held a truth she couldn't deny, even as it terrified her. The locket at her throat seemed to burn against her skin, its empty frame suddenly a question she wasn't ready to answer. Ashley's voice, when it came, was a whisper, brittle with disbelief. "You're lying. My family's dead. Everyone's dead. That's what the note said." Her hands clenched into fists, the memory of those scrawled words a lifeline she clung to against this man's impossible claim. Ash's face crumpled, pain flashing across it as he shook his head. "I thought so too, for years. But I'm here, ain't I? And so are you. I've been looking, praying, and now I've got you back. We got a lot to make up for, Ashley." His use of her name, spoken with such aching familiarity, sent a shiver down her spine. She wanted to run, to scream for William and Cora, but her legs felt rooted to the earth, trapped by the weight of a past she'd never known. As the sun crept higher, casting long shadows over the clearing, Ashley stood frozen, torn between the life she'd been building and the specter of a father she'd believed lost to fire. Ash watched her, his expression a mix of hope and fear, as if he knew one wrong word could shatter whatever fragile thread connected them. Behind them, the horse snorted softly, oblivious to the storm brewing in her heart. Ashley's world had tilted, the Hensley farm a distant memory, and in its place loomed a man who claimed to be her blood. A shadow from a past she couldn't remember, dragging her into an unknown future she wasn't sure she wanted. Chapter 5. A Father's Regret. The first rays of dawn painted the clearing in muted gold as Ashley Norman stood, still trembling, before the man who claimed to be her father. Ash Norman's weathered face, lined with years of hardship, softened as he watched her, his hazel eyes, mirror images of her own, pleading for something she wasn't ready to give. The shock of his sudden appearance, of being torn from the Hensley farm in the dead of night, lingered like a fog in her mind. Her thin nightdress and the coarse blanket draped over her shoulders offered little warmth against the morning chill, but it was the weight of his words, "I'm your father," that truly made her shiver. She wanted to deny it, to turn and run back to the life she knew, yet a nagging doubt, fueled by the familiarity in his gaze, held her in place. Ash broke the tense silence, his voice low and rough with emotion. "I know this ain't how a reunion ought to be, snatching you like that. I'm sorry, Ashley. I just couldn't risk losing you again, not after all these years thinking you was gone." He gestured toward a small fire he'd started, its meager flames crackling as he urged her to sit and warm herself. Reluctantly she complied, her body stiff with weariness, though the heat was a small mercy. He sat across from her, his hands fidgeting with a worn leather pouch, as if searching for the right words. "We're heading to Oklahoma," he continued. "Got plans for us there. A new start. A piece of land to call our own. I've dreamed of it. For you and me. Ever since I learned you was alive." Ashley's mind reeled at the mention of Oklahoma, a place she'd only read about in her tattered books at St. Mary's, a land of wide plains and endless possibility. But the dream felt tainted, forced upon her by a stranger who claimed a bond she couldn't feel. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" she asked, her voice sharp despite the tremor in it. "You say you're my father, but I don't remember you. I don't remember anything before the orphanage. There was a note, said everyone was dead. If you're alive, why didn't you come for me sooner?" Her questions spilled out, each one a brick in the wall of doubt she'd built around herself. Ash's face fell, pain etching deeper lines into his features as he looked away, staring into the fire as if it held the answers he struggled to give. "I thought you was dead too," he said quietly. "That fire, it took everything. Our home, your ma, or so I believed. I was half mad with grief, barely got out myself. I wandered for months, broken, thinking I'd lost it all. Didn't know you'd survived till a year ago, when I ran into Lily, our old maid, who worked for us back then. She told me she'd found you in the wreckage, thought I was gone, thought everyone was. She couldn't keep you, not without a job or a home, so she left you at St. Mary's with that note. I've been searching ever since, tracking down every lead till I found you with them farmers." The name Lily struck a faint chord in Ashley's memory, though it was more a feeling than a face, a vague sense of safety tied to the singed blanket and the locket she still wore. She touched the tarnished metal at her throat, its empty frame a constant enigma. If she saved me, why didn't she tell someone? Why leave me there to think I had no one? Her voice cracked, years of loneliness seeping into the words. Ash shook his head, his own regret palpable. "Lily was scared, young herself, and had nothing to offer you. She did what she thought was best, giving you a chance at safety. I don't blame her, not now. I only blame myself for not finding you sooner." As they spoke, Ash packed up their meager camp, preparing to continue their journey. He offered her a piece of hardtack from his pouch, a silent gesture of care, though Ashley barely touched it, her appetite lost to the storm of emotions within her. They mounted the horse again, her body pressed uncomfortably against his as they rode westward, the landscape shifting from familiar fields to rougher, untamed terrain. Each mile took her farther from the Hensleys, from the life she'd begun to build, and the ache of that loss mingled with her uncertainty about the man guiding her. Yet as the hours passed, Ash's stories, of a small house by a creek, of her mother's laughter, of a toddler Ashley chasing chickens in the yard, began to weave a fragile thread of connection. They were memories she couldn't claim as her own, but his voice, thick with longing, made them feel almost real. Still, questions gnawed at her. What had caused the fire? Why had he survived when her mother hadn't? And what did he mean by plans in Oklahoma? Could she trust his vision of a future when the past was still so shrouded in shadow? Ashley's gaze often drifted to the horizon, her mind torn between the pull of answers and the fear of what they might reveal. Ash, sensing her turmoil, tried to fill the silences with promises, of a ranch, of a family rebuilt, of making up for lost time. "I ain't perfect, girl," he admitted during a brief stop by a stream, his hands rough as he filled a canteen. "I've made mistakes, plenty of 'em, but I swear, I'll spend every day I got left showing you I'm the father you deserved back then." By day's end, as they made camp under a canopy of stars brighter than any Ashley had seen from St. Mary's cracked windows, exhaustion dulled her fear but not her doubt. She lay on the hard ground, the blanket pulled tight around her, listening to Ash's steady breathing as he kept watch. Oklahoma loomed ahead, a destination as uncertain as the man beside her. Her fingers traced the locket's edge, a silent prayer for clarity, for a sign that this journey, forced upon her in the dead of night, was leading somewhere she could call home. For now, though, she was adrift, caught between a past she couldn't remember and a future she couldn't yet believe in, with only a father's regret to guide her through the unknown. Chapter 6. The Long Arm of Justice. The morning sun had barely crested the horizon when William Hensley burst into the kitchen, his face a mask of fury and fear. Cora, pale and trembling in her rocking chair, clutched a handkerchief to her lips as he recounted finding Ashley's attic room empty, the window forced open, and no sign of the girl who had become their extra pair of hands, their quiet companion. Samuel and Hannah, sensing the tension, huddled near their mother, their wide eyes darting between their parents. "She's been taken, Cora," William growled, his voice thick with emotion. "Some lowlife snatched her in the night. I'm not going to let him get away with this." Cora nodded weakly, her coughs punctuating her resolve. "We'll find her, William. We have to. She's family now, whether she knows it or not." By mid-morning, the local sheriff, a grizzled man named Ezekiel Brandt with a reputation for unrelenting justice, arrived at the farm, his deputy trailing behind with a pair of bloodhounds. William recounted every detail: the open window, the scuffed earth beneath it, the faint tracks leading into the fields. Sheriff Brandt's jaw tightened as he surveyed the scene, his hand resting on the pistol at his hip. "Sounds like a kidnapping, plain and simple," he said, his voice a low rumble. "We've had drifters passing through lately, looking for easy pickings. I'll round up a posse and we'll track 'em down. If he's harmed a hair on that girl's head, he'll swing for it." William's eyes darkened with agreement, his protective anger a palpable force as he vowed to join the search, leaving Cora to manage the farm with the help of a neighbor. Miles away, Ashley and Ash Norman rode through rugged terrain, their horses' pace slowing as exhaustion set in. Ashley's mind churned with doubt and fear, her father's stories of a past life clashing with the reality of being torn from the Hensleys. She hadn't had time to process his claims, let alone decide if she believed them, when the distant baying of hounds cut through the morning stillness. Ash's face hardened, his grip on the reins tightening. "They're coming for us," he muttered, spurring the horse onward. "Those farmers must have raised the alarm. We gotta move faster, girl." Ashley's heart pounded, torn between the urge to flee with this man who might be her kin and the pull of the only stability she'd known in years. The posse, led by Sheriff Brandt and William, moved with grim determination, the hounds picking up the scent near a stream where Ash and Ashley had briefly rested. William's hands clenched into fists as he rode alongside the sheriff, his thoughts a storm of guilt for not hearing the intrusion, rage at the unknown abductor, and a fierce need to bring Ashley back safe. The tracks led them through dense woods and over rocky hills, each mile fueling their resolve. By late afternoon, they spotted a lone figure on horseback in the distance, a smaller shape slumped before him. "That's her!" William shouted, his voice raw with emotion. Sheriff Brandt raised a hand for silence, signaling the posse to fan out, cutting off any chance of escape. Ash saw them too late. The horse, weary from the long ride, stumbled as he tried to veer off, and within moments, the posse closed in, rifles drawn and voices barking commands. "Get down now! Hands where I can see 'em!" Sheriff Brandt bellowed, his pistol aimed squarely at Ash. Ashley slid off the horse, her legs shaky, her eyes wide with confusion as she saw William among the men, his face a mixture of relief and fury. Ash raised his hands slowly, his expression defiant but resigned, as the deputy wrestled him to the ground, binding his wrists with rough rope. "You've got the wrong idea, lawman," Ash spat. "I'm her father. I ain't kidnappin'. I'm savin' her." The word father hit Ashley like a stone, echoing in her mind as William dismounted and rushed to her side, his calloused hands gripping her shoulders. "You all right, girl? Did he hurt ya?" His concern was genuine, but his anger simmered beneath it, directed at the man now kneeling in the dirt. Ashley shook her head, her voice caught in her throat, unable to explain the turmoil within her. Sheriff Brandt scoffed at Ash's claim, his eyes narrowing. "Father, huh? That's a mighty convenient story for a man caught stealing a child in the night. You'll have your say in court, but I reckon a noose'll be waiting for you. Kidnappin's a hanging offense round here." William's nod was curt, his protective instinct overriding any doubt as he pulled Ashley close, shielding her from the sight of Ash being dragged to a waiting horse. Back at the farm, The reunion was bittersweet. Cora wept softly as she embraced Ashley, her frail arms trembling with relief, while Samuel and Hannah clung to her skirts, their questions tumbling over each other. But Ashley felt like a stranger in their midst, her thoughts drifting to Ash, now locked in the town jail awaiting trial. The sheriff's words about hanging echoed in her ears, a chilling reminder of the stakes. She helped with chores that evening, her movements mechanical, as William and Cora discussed the case in hushed tones by the fire. "He'll pay for what he's done," William said, his voice hard. "Taking a girl from her home, there's no excuse for that." Cora, though softer, agreed, her worry for Ashley outweighing any sympathy for the stranger's claims. Ashley, sitting on the stairs out of sight, listened with a heavy heart. She couldn't deny the Hensleys' care for her, their anger born of a protective love she hadn't fully realized until now. Yet Ash's face, those hazel eyes so like her own, the raw pain in his voice as he spoke of their lost family, haunted her. Was he truly her father, or a desperate liar grasping at a connection that didn't exist? The locket at her throat felt like a lead weight, its empty frame a symbol of the answers she lacked. That night, in her attic room, she lay awake, torn between the safety of the farm and the gnawing doubt about where she truly belonged. Meanwhile, in the cold, damp cell of the town jail, Ash sat with his head in his hands, the reality of his fate sinking in. He had no proof of his claim beyond his word and the memories he carried, memories of a little girl with his eyes, of a life destroyed by fire. He knew the law wouldn't wait long. A trial in these parts was swift, and a hanging swifter still. His only hope was Ashley, the daughter he'd fought to reclaim. If she doubted him, if she turned away, he'd face the noose with nothing but regret. But if she believed, even a sliver, there might be a chance to prove his truth before the long arm of justice closed around him for good. Chapter 7. A House in Mourning. The autumn air carried a bitter chill as the Hensley farm descended into a silence deeper than any Ashley had ever known. Cora's passing came swiftly, her frail body succumbing to the persistent cough that had plagued her for months. It happened on a gray October morning, just days after Ashley's return from the harrowing ordeal with Ash. William found Cora slumped in her rocking chair by the hearth, her face peaceful at last, as if the pain had finally released its grip. The doctor, summoned too late, could only confirm what they already knew. The family buried her beneath the old oak behind the barn, a simple wooden cross marking the spot where she'd often sat to watch the children play. William, stoic as ever, carved her name into the wood with trembling hands, while Samuel and Hannah clung to Ashley, their small sobs the only sound in the still air. In the days that followed, the farm became a house in mourning, its once warm walls echoing with an emptiness that seemed to seep into every corner. Cora had been the heart of the home, her quiet strength holding them together through lean times and long days. Without her, the rhythm of life faltered. William threw himself into the fields, working from dawn until dusk, his grief buried beneath layers of sweat and soil. He spoke little, his eyes hollow when they met Ashley's, as if he couldn't bear to see the void reflected back at him. The younger children, Samuel and Hannah, trailed after Ashley like lost lambs, their questions about their mother unanswered, their need for comfort a constant weight on her shoulders. At just 15, Ashley found herself thrust into a role she was unprepared for. The burden of managing the farm fell squarely on her, a crushing load that left her breathless. She rose before the sun to stoke the fire, cook meager meals of porridge and stew, and tend to the children's needs, washing their tear-streaked faces, mending their clothes, and soothing their nightmares. The housework was endless, scrubbing floors, laundering linens, and keeping the pantry stocked with whatever she could scrounge from the garden. The farm chores, too, demanded her attention. Milking the cows, feeding the chickens, and hauling water from the well until her arms ached. Each task was a reminder of Cora's absence, her gentle instructions no longer there to guide Ashley through the chaos. The once cozy kitchen, where Cora had hummed softly while baking bread, now felt like a cavern of loss. Ashley stood at the stove one evening, stirring a pot of thin soup, when the weight of it all crashed over her. Tears slipped down her cheeks, mixing with the steam, as Hannah tugged at her apron, asking for a story Cora used to tell. "I don't know it, Hannah," Ashley whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry. I'm trying." The little girl's disappointed pout was a dagger to her heart, a reminder of how inadequate she felt in the face of their grief. Samuel, too, grew quieter. His boyish energy dimmed, often sitting by the window staring at the oak tree as if waiting for his mother to return. Nights offered no respite. Exhausted, Ashley collapsed into her attic bed, her body aching, only to lie awake with the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. The farm was slipping. Crops needed harvesting, repairs loomed, and William's silence hinted at a despair she couldn't reach. She felt like a child playing at being grown, drowning under the expectations of a role she hadn't chosen. The memory of Ash, still languishing in the town jail awaiting trial, haunted her too, a flicker of doubt about her place here gnawing at her. But there was no time to dwell on him. Survival demanded every ounce of her strength. Desperation clawed at her after a particularly grueling week when a storm damaged the barn roof and Samuel fell ill with a fever. Ashley couldn't do it alone anymore. Sitting at the kitchen table late one night, her hands raw from scrubbing, she penned a plea to William as he mended a harness by lamplight. "We need help, William," she said, her voice steady despite the exhaustion lacing it. "I can't keep up with everything. The children, the farm, the house. It's too much. I've been thinking." Ash mentioned a woman named Lily, a maid who worked for my family before the fire. "She's the one who saved me, left me at St. Mary's. If we could find her, maybe she'd come. She might know me, might ease the load. Please, can we send for her?" William looked up, his weathered face etched with fatigue and sorrow, his eyes searching hers for a moment. The mention of Ash stirred a flicker of anger, but it was quickly overshadowed by the reality of their situation. He rubbed a hand over his jaw, considering her words. "Lily, huh? Don't know if tracking down some ghost from your past will help, but I can't argue we're in a bad way. I'll ask around in town, see if anyone's heard of her. Sheriff Brandt might know something. He's got ears everywhere. But don't get your hopes up, girl. We've got enough ghosts already." His tone was gruff, but there was a softness beneath it, a reluctant acknowledgement of her struggle. Ashley nodded, a spark of hope flickering amidst her grief. Lily was a name tied to her earliest, haziest memories, a fleeting sense of safety amid chaos, a connection to a past she couldn't fully grasp. If Lily could be found, perhaps her presence would bring not just help, but answers, a bridge between the life Ashley had lost and the one she was fighting to hold together. For now, though, she returned to her tasks, wiping Hannah's nose, checking on Samuel's fever, and stoking the fire against the creeping cold. The farm felt hollow, a shell of the home it once was, but Ashley's resolve hardened with each passing day. She would carry this burden, for Cora's memory, for the children, for William, until help came, or until she broke under the weight of it all. Her strength, tested to its limits, was all that kept the Mourning house from crumbling entirely. Chapter 8. A Lockets Truth. The small courtroom in the heart of town buzzed with tension as the trial of Ash Norman began on a crisp November morning. The wooden benches were packed with townsfolk, their murmurs a low hum of curiosity and judgment, while the air carried the scent of damp wool and old timber. Ashley sat near the front, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her heart a storm of conflicting emotions. William sat beside her, his face a mask of stoic anger, still unconvinced of Ash's claims despite the weeks since the kidnapping. Sheriff Brandt stood by the judge's bench, his stern gaze fixed on the defendant, while the judge, a wiry man with wire-rimmed spectacles, called the room to order with a sharp rap of his gavel. Ash, shackled and gaunt from his time in jail, stood before them, his hazel eyes, eerily like Ashley's, searching for her in the crowd. The prosecution laid out their case with cold precision, painting Ash as a desperate drifter who had stolen a child from a loving home, a man with no proof of kinship and a motive rooted in delusion or malice. This man abducted Ashley Norman in the dead of night with no regard for her safety or the law, the prosecutor declared, his voice ringing through the room. "Kidnapping is a hanging offense, and we demand justice for the Hensley family, who took this girl in as their own." William's jaw tightened at the words, his protective anger simmering, while Ashley felt a pang of guilt. She knew the Hensleys cared for her, yet the doubt about her true origins gnawed at her relentlessly. When it was Ash's turn to speak, the room fell silent, every eye on the man who had upended Ashley's life. His voice, rough from disuse, carried a raw sincerity as he addressed the court. "I ain't denying I took her, but it weren't kidnapping. I'm her father, Ash Norman, and I thought she was dead for nigh on 12 years after a fire took our home and my wife. I only learned she lived a year ago, and I've been searching ever since. I couldn't leave her thinking she had no one, not when I'm still breathing." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, skepticism mingling with curiosity, as the judge leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "That's a fine story, Mr. Norman," the judge said, his tone dry. "But words ain't evidence. You got anything to back this claim, or are we wasting our time?" Ash nodded, his hands trembling slightly as he reached into his tattered coat pocket, producing a small, tarnished object that glinted in the dim light of the courtroom. He held it up for all to see, a half of a locket, its jagged edge a perfect mirror to the one Ashley wore around her neck. Her breath caught, her fingers instinctively touching the empty frame at her throat, a piece of her past she'd carried since St. Mary's. "This belonged to my wife, Eleanor," Ash said, his voice breaking with emotion. "I took it from her body after the fire as I grieved, thinking I'd lost everything. It's the other half of what Ashley's got. Open it, and you'll see her ma's face, a picture I kept close all these years." At the judge's nod, Sheriff Brandt took the locket half and brought it to Ashley, who hesitated before accepting it with shaking hands. The crowd watched, breathless, as she fitted the two pieces together, the broken edges aligning perfectly with a faint click. Inside Ash's half was a faded photograph of a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile, her features hauntingly familiar, stirring a deep, unplaceable ache in Ashley's chest. She stared at it, tears welling as Ash continued, his voice softer now. "And her name, Ashley, it ain't no coincidence. I named her after myself, hoping she'd carry a piece of me into the world. Eleanor and I chose it together before she was even born. If that ain't proof, I don't know what is." The courtroom erupted in whispers, the weight of the evidence undeniable. Ashley's gaze met Ash's across the room, and for the first time, she saw not just a stranger, but a man broken by loss, a father who had fought to reclaim what he thought was gone forever. The judge called for order, his gavel banging sharply, before turning to the prosecutor. "Unless you've got something to counter this, I'm inclined to see truth in Mr. Norman's claim. Physical evidence like this, paired with the name, ain't easily dismissed." The prosecutor, visibly frustrated, could offer no rebuttal, and after a tense deliberation the judge rendered his verdict. "Ash Norman, I'm releasing you on the grounds of paternity, but let it be known, taking a child without due process ain't the law's way. You're free, but you're on thin ice. Case dismissed." As the shackles were removed, Ash rubbed his wrists, his eyes never leaving Ashley, who remained seated, the joined locket clutched in her hands. William exhaled sharply, his anger giving way to reluctant acceptance, though his posture remained rigid. The crowd dispersed, some grumbling about justice denied, others moved by the reunion unfolding before them. Ash approached slowly, almost hesitantly, as if afraid she'd reject him now that the truth was laid bare. "I'm sorry for the way I did things, girl," he said quietly, standing a few feet away. "I just couldn't lose you again. I've spent years mourning you and your ma. Seeing you alive, it's more than I ever hoped for." Ashley looked up, her voice barely a whisper as tears streaked her face. "I don't remember her. Or you. All those years I thought I was alone. Why did it take so long?" The pain of their lost time hung between them, a chasm of grief and misunderstanding. Ash's face crumpled, his own eyes glistening. "I thought you was gone too. That fire, it broke me. I wandered, half dead inside, till I heard you'd survived. I ain't got the words to make up for it, but I'll try every day, if you'll let me." The moment was bittersweet, a vindication for Ash, who had faced the noose for his desperate act, and a revelation for Ashley, who now held tangible proof of her origins in the form of her mother's image. Yet, the reunion carried the weight of what could never be reclaimed: childhood years spent in loneliness, a mother's love she'd never know, a father's presence absent until now. As they left the courtroom together, Ashley still clutching the locket, she felt the ground shift beneath her. The Hensleys had been her family, but this man, her true father, was a link to a past she couldn't ignore. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with the pain of rebuilding trust, but for the first time, Ashley knew she wasn't entirely alone in the world. She carried her mother's face and her father's name as undeniable truths to guide her through the unknown. Chapter 9. An Unexpected Bond. Winter settled over the Hensley farm with a quiet ferocity, blanketing the fields in snow and turning the air sharp with frost. Ashley trudged through her daily tasks, her breath visible in the cold as she hauled firewood, fed the livestock, and tended to Samuel and Hannah, whose spirits remained dimmed by their mother's absence. The weight of responsibility still pressed heavily on her, though the arrival of Lily, the maid from her distant past, had eased some of the burden. Lily had come just a week after William's inquiries in town bore fruit, tracked down through old records and a letter sent by Sheriff Brandt to a neighboring county. She was a stout woman in her late 30s, with a weathered face and kind, knowing eyes that seemed to carry memories of Ashley's infancy. Her presence brought a practical strength to the household. Meals were cooked with efficiency, laundry managed with a steady hand, and the children found comfort in her gentle firmness. Ashley, though initially wary, felt a quiet relief in Lily's company. The woman remembered her as a toddler, recounting vague snippets of a life before the fire, how she'd sung lullabies to Ashley in a cramped tenement, how she'd bundled her up and fled to St. Mary's when the flames consumed everything. These stories, though fragmented, were a tether to a past Ashley couldn't grasp on her own, and they softened the edges of her grief. Yet the farm remained a place of shadows, haunted by Cora's absence and the unresolved tension of Ash's release. He had taken up temporary lodging in town, giving Ashley space to process their reunion, though his presence loomed in her thoughts as she wrestled with where her loyalties lay. Amidst this somber backdrop, an unexpected shift began to unfold, subtle at first, like the first thaw after a long freeze. William, who had buried his sorrow in endless labor, started lingering in the kitchen longer than necessary when Lily was there, his gruff demeanor softening as they exchanged small talk over coffee. Lily, with her no-nonsense attitude, matched his quiet stoicism with a dry wit that drew rare, reluctant smiles from him. One evening, as Ashley scrubbed pots at the sink, she noticed William offering to carry a heavy pot of stew for Lily, their hands brushing briefly, a gesture so small, yet so unlike the man who had kept everyone at arm's length since Cora's death. Lily's cheeks flushed faintly and she murmured a thanks, her eyes meeting his for a moment longer than needed. Over the following weeks, this tentative connection grew into something more tangible. William began seeking Lily out for advice on farm matters, though Ashley suspected it was more an excuse to hear her voice than a genuine need for input. Lily, in turn, seemed to anticipate his moods, leaving a mug of hot broth by his chair after a long day in the fields or mending his worn coat without being asked. Their conversations deepened, often late at night when the children slept and Ashley lay in her attic room, hearing the low murmur of their voices through the floorboards. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone, gentle, almost tender, spoke of a healing neither had expected to find. For Ashley, witnessing this budding romance was a flicker of light in a home that had felt hollow for too long. One frosty afternoon, as she and Lily hung laundry on the line, the wind biting at their fingers, Ashley caught a glimpse of William watching from the barn door, his expression softer than she'd ever seen. Lily noticed too, and a shy smile curved her lips as she turned back to the task. "He's a good man, your William," Lily said quietly, her voice carrying a warmth Ashley hadn't expected. "Lost a lot, but he's still standin'? Takes strength, that does." Ashley nodded, unsure how to respond, but the moment lingered with her, a reminder that even in the wake of loss, life could stitch itself back together in unexpected ways. The children felt the shift, too. Samuel, ever observant, tugged at Ashley's sleeve one evening, pointing to where William and Lily sat by the hearth, sharing a quiet laugh over a story Lily told about a stubborn cow from her old employer's farm. "Pa looks happy," Samuel whispered, a note of wonder in his voice. Hannah, curled in Ashley's lap, giggled softly, her grief momentarily forgotten. For the first time in months, the house seemed to breathe again, the oppressive silence giving way to small bursts of warmth, a shared meal, a repaired fence, a moment of laughter that echoed off the walls. Ashley, though still burdened by her own struggles, found a glimmer of hope in this newfound bond. She saw in William and Lily a chance for healing, not just for themselves, but for the entire household. It was a reminder that love, even in its quietest, most tentative form, could emerge from the ashes of sorrow. As she watched them one evening, William's hand resting briefly on Lily's shoulder as he passed her a plate, Ashley felt a pang of longing for her own sense of belonging, torn between the father she was only beginning to know and the family she'd built here. Yet in that moment, she allowed herself to believe in new beginnings, if not for herself, then for those around her. The farm, once a place of mourning, began to feel like a home again, its heart slowly mending through an unexpected connection that none of them had foreseen. Chapter 10. A Partnership Forged. Spring arrived on the Hensley farm with a tentative warmth, melting the last patches of winter snow and coaxing green shoots from the earth. The household had begun to find a fragile rhythm, bolstered by Lily's steady presence and the quiet bond forming between her and William. Ashley, still navigating her dual ties to the Hensleys and her newly confirmed father, Ash, felt the weight of her responsibilities lighten slightly, though her heart remained a battlefield of loyalty and longing. Ash had kept his distance since his release, renting a small room in town and taking odd jobs to prove he could stand on his own while giving Ashley space to process their reunion. But the farm, with its endless demands, was about to draw him back into her life in a way none of them anticipated. One early April morning, as William wrestled with a broken fence line under a drizzling sky, he spotted a familiar figure trudging up the dirt path toward the house. Ash Norman, his coat patched and his face weathered, carried a determined set to his shoulders. William straightened, wiping sweat from his brow, his initial wariness giving way to curiosity as Ash stopped a respectful distance away. "Heard you might be needin' an extra hand," Ash said, his voice steady but cautious. "I've worked farms before, cattle mostly back before everything. I ain't askin' for charity, just a chance to earn my keep and to be near my girl if she'll have me around." William studied him, the memory of the kidnapping still a bitter taste, but the farm's needs and Ashley's quiet struggle with her past softened his resolve. After a long pause, he nodded. "All right, Norman, we'll try it. But you pull your weight or you're gone. No second chances." Ash started that very day, throwing himself into the grueling labor with a grit that surprised even William. He mended fences with a practiced hand, hauled hay bales without complaint, and showed a knack for handling the cattle, calming skittish calves with a low, steady voice. Ashley watched from the kitchen window as the two men worked side by side, her father's presence on the farm both strange and comforting. At first their interactions were terse, limited to curt instructions and grunts of acknowledgement, but over weeks, a grudging respect began to take root. William noted Ash's skill in negotiating with local traders for feed, securing better prices with a sharp eye for value, while Ash admired William's unyielding dedication to the land, a mirror to his own stubborn drive. By late spring, their collaboration deepened into something more substantial. During a long evening in the barn, as they sorted cattle for market under the flickering light of a lantern, Ash proposed an idea that had been brewing since he'd arrived. "We've got a good herd here, Hensley," he said, leaning on a pitchfork, his tone thoughtful. "But the real money's in expandin', buying young stock cheap, fattening 'em up, and sellin' to the big drives headin' west. I've got contacts from my old days, folks who'd trust my word on a deal. We could split the work and the profit, make something bigger than just scraping by." William, initially skeptical, chewed on the idea overnight, weighing the risk against the farm's stagnant returns. The next day, he agreed, shaking Ash's hand with a rare, firm nod. "We'll start small, see if you're as good as you claim, but it's a partnership, Norman. We sink or swim together." Their venture into the cattle trade began with a modest purchase of a dozen yearlings from a neighboring ranch, funded by pooling their sparse savings. The work was relentless. Long days driving the herd to fresh pasture, nights spent guarding against rustlers, and endless haggling at market. But their complementary strengths shone through. William's deep knowledge of the land ensured the cattle thrived, while Ash's knack for bartering turned their first sale into a surprising profit. They reinvested every penny, expanding the herd bit by bit, their shared labor forging a bond neither had expected. Over suppers in the kitchen, with Lily's hearty meals fueling their plans, they discussed routes and prices, their voices occasionally rising in disagreement but always settling on compromise. Ashley, listening as she cleared plates, saw in their partnership a bridge between her two worlds, a melding of the family she'd found and the one she'd lost. For Ashley, watching her father reclaim a place in the world stirred a deep, quiet pride. Ash, once a broken man facing a noose, now stood taller, his hands calloused from honest work, his eyes brighter with purpose. She saw echoes of herself in his determination, a shared resilience that had carried them both through years of hardship. One evening, as they sat on the porch after a long day, Ash carving a small wooden toy for Hannah, he glanced at her with a tentative smile. "I never thought I'd have this. Working here, seeing you grow into yourself. I know I can't make up for the time we lost, but I'm trying, Ashley. I hope you see that." She nodded, her throat tight, the locket at her neck a reminder of their shared past. "I do, Pa," she said softly, the words still unfamiliar but growing easier. "I'm glad you're here." The farm, once a place of mourning and struggle, began to hum with a new energy. Samuel and Hannah took to Ash, trailing him in the fields with wide-eyed curiosity, while Lily's warmth wove them all closer, her bond with William a steady anchor. The cattle trade flourished, each successful sale a testament to William and Ash's mutual respect, their partnership a foundation built on hard work and hard-won trust. For Ashley, this unity, her father and her adoptive family working as one, offered a sense of belonging she'd never thought possible. It wasn't perfect. The scars of loss and separation lingered, but in the shared sweat of their labor, in the quiet moments of laughter over a meal, she found a family forged not just by blood or circumstance, but by choice and perseverance. Chapter 11. Dreams of Oklahoma. Ash and Ashley had always carried a quiet dream in their hearts, a vision of wide-open spaces and a life rooted in the earth. After years of saving and planning, that dream finally took shape when they purchased a sprawling ranch in the rolling hills of Oklahoma. The partnership with William with their sad goodbyes enabled them to now live their dream. The land was raw and untamed, a patchwork of golden grasses and stubborn scrub oak, stretching out beneath a sky so vast it seemed to swallow the horizon. The moment they stepped onto the property, with the deed in hand and the scent of dust and wildflowers in the air, they knew they had found their place. It was a new beginning, one filled with both daunting challenges and the electric thrill of possibility. The ranch, which they named Golden Plains, spanned over 200 acres, much of it overgrown and neglected by its previous owners. Fences sagged under the weight of time, the barn leaned precariously to one side, and the old farmhouse creaked with every gust of wind. Yet beneath the decay, there was promise. Ash could see it in the fertile soil that crumbled between his fingers, and Ashley felt it in the way the morning light painted the fields in hues of amber and gold. They threw themselves into the work, their days filled with the ache of manual labor and the satisfaction of small victories, repairing a section of fence, clearing a patch of land for grazing, or coaxing the ancient well pump back to life. It was during one of those early, exhausting days that they met Jack Morgan. He showed up at their gate, a lanky young man in his early 20s with a worn cowboy hat tilted low over his eyes and a shy, earnest smile. He'd heard through the local grapevine that the new owners of Golden Plains might need a hand, and he was looking for work. Ash and Ashley were cautious at first. Trust was hard to come by in a place where they were still strangers, but there was something in Jack's quiet determination that made them give him a chance. He asked for nothing more than a fair wage and a place to prove himself, and they agreed to a trial run. Jack quickly became indispensable. He had grown up on a small family farm not far from there, and though he lacked formal education, he possessed a deep, instinctive understanding of the land and livestock. He could mend a fence faster than Ash, spot a sick calf before symptoms even showed, and work from dawn until dusk without a word of complaint. More than that, he had a gentle way about him, a patience that calmed the skittish horses and earned the trust of even the most stubborn mules. Ashley often watched him from the porch as he worked, noting how his hands moved with quiet confidence, and she began to see him as more than just a hired hand. He was becoming part of their fledgling family. The challenges of establishing the ranch were endless. The land itself seemed to resist taming, with sudden storms that turned the fields to mud and droughts that cracked the earth underfoot. Predators roamed the edges of their property, coyotes whose eerie howls pierced the night, and hawks that circled ominously above the chicken coop. Equipment broke down at the worst possible moments, and the nearest town was a 30-minute drive over rutted dirt roads. Yet for every setback, there was a moment of triumph. The first time they saw their small herd of cattle grazing peacefully on a newly cleared pasture, Ash let out a whoop of joy that echoed across the hills. When Ashley planted a vegetable garden near the farmhouse and watched the first green shoots push through the soil, she felt a connection to the land that went deeper than ownership. Through it all, Jack's presence grew more vital. He wasn't just a worker. He was a partner in their dream. Late at night, after the day's labor was done, the three of them would sit on the porch, sipping coffee as the stars emerged one by one. Jack would share stories of his childhood, of learning to ride before he could walk and dreaming of one day having a place of his own. Ash and Ashley listened, realizing how much their own aspirations mirrored his. They began to teach him the business side of ranching, how to track expenses, negotiate with suppliers, and plan for the seasons ahead, hoping to give him the tools to build his future, even as he helped them build theirs. The Oklahoma landscape itself became a character in their story, wild and unpredictable, yet breathtaking in its beauty. There were mornings when the mist hung low over the fields, transforming the world into a dreamscape of silver and shadow. There were evenings when the sun dipped below the horizon, setting the sky ablaze with colors so vivid they seemed painted by an artist's hand. The land held a quiet power, a reminder of both its harshness and its generosity. It demanded everything they had: sweat, patience, and resilience. But in return, it offered a sense of belonging they had never known before. As the weeks turned into months, Golden Plains began to take shape. The barn stood straighter after Jack and Ash spent a grueling weekend reinforcing its frame. The farmhouse, though still rough around the edges, felt more like a home with every repair Ashley tackled. The herd grew, and the first profits from a small cattle sale gave them hope that this venture could sustain them. Jack, too, grew into his role, no longer just the young farmhand seeking work, but a trusted confidant and friend. Ash and Ashley knew they couldn't have come this far without him, and they began to imagine a future where he might stay on, not as an employee, but as a partner in the truest sense. Their dream of Oklahoma was no longer just a distant vision. It was becoming real, etched into every calloused hand and every acre they reclaimed. The land still held mysteries and challenges they couldn't yet foresee, but with Jack by their side, Ash and Ashley felt ready to face whatever came next. Golden Plains was more than a ranch. It was a testament to their grit, their hope, and the unexpected bonds that can form when dreams are shared under an endless sky. Chapter 12. A Father's Farewell. The late summer heat hung heavy over Golden Plains, the Oklahoma ranch that Ash and Ashley had poured their hearts into building. The days were long and grueling, filled with the endless tasks of taming the wild land, but there was a quiet satisfaction in their progress. The herd had grown, the farmhouse stood sturdier, and with Jack Morgan's steady help, the ranch felt like a true home. Yet nature, as ever, remained a force beyond their control, and tragedy loomed on a stormy afternoon when the skies darkened with ominous intent. A sudden downpour turned the gentle creek that cut through their property into a raging river, its waters swelling with mud and debris. Ash, ever vigilant, noticed a young calf stranded on a shrinking spit of land in the middle of the torrent, its plaintive cries barely audible over the roar of the flood. Without hesitation, he grabbed a rope and waded into the icy current, his determination outweighing the danger. Ashley and Jack shouted for him to wait, to find another way, but Ash's stubborn resolve, born of years of loss and a need to protect what was his, drove him forward. He reached the calf, looping the rope around its trembling frame, and with Jack's help from the bank, they pulled it to safety. But the river exacted its toll. Soaked to the bone and shivering in the relentless wind, Ash collapsed on the muddy shore, his breath ragged, his strength sapped by the ordeal. That night a fever took hold, and within days it became clear that Ash had contracted pneumonia. His condition worsened rapidly, the harsh coughs racking his frame as he lay in the small bedroom of the farmhouse, the very space he'd once hammered into shape with dreams of a future. Ashley, frantic with worry, tended to him alongside Jack, boiling water for steam to ease his breathing and pressing cool cloths to his burning forehead. They sent for a doctor from town, but the journey was long and Ash's time was shorter. By the third night his skin was ashen, his eyes glassy, and Ashley knew with a sinking heart that she was losing him. In the dim light of a single lantern, Ash reached for her hand, his grip weak but insistent. Ashley sat beside him, her throat tight with unshed tears, as he struggled to speak through labored breaths. "My girl," he rasped, his voice a whisper of the strength it once held. "I've got to say this while I still can. I love you, Ashley, more than I ever knew a heart could hold. I've watched you grow into a woman of such strength, such beauty, inside and out. You're my pride, my everything." A faint smile touched his lips, though it cost him effort. "I spent years thinking I'd lost you, and God, He gave me this gift, letting me find you again. I'm grateful, so grateful for every day we've had. I wish I'd had more time to make up for what was taken from us." Ashley's tears fell freely now, her hand clutching his as if she could anchor him to life through sheer will. "Pa, don't talk like that. You're gonna get better. We've got so much left to do here. Together," she pleaded, though the hollowness in her chest told her otherwise. Ash shook his head gently, his eyes soft with a peace she hadn't seen before. "I've done what I came to do, darling. I found you. I built something with you. This ranch, it's yours now, your legacy. Keep it going, for me, for your ma. And don't be alone. Let Jack, let others stand with you. I know you can carry this, 'cause you've carried worse." His words hung in the air, a final testament to their shared journey, from the ashes of a lost family to the courtroom revelation of their bond, through the struggles of rebuilding trust to the dream of Golden Plains. Each memory flashed through Ashley's mind, a tapestry of pain and love as she bent to kiss his forehead, her sobs muffled against his fevered skin. Ash's breathing grew shallower, each exhale a quiet surrender, until, in the still hours before dawn, he slipped away, his hand going limp in hers. The silence that followed was deafening, a void that swallowed the room, leaving Ashley hollowed out by grief. Jack, who had stood vigil in the doorway, stepped forward silently, his own eyes red-rimmed as he helped her cover Ash with a quilt. They buried him the next day on a rise overlooking the ranch, beneath a solitary oak that stood as a sentinel over the land he'd fought for. Ashley carved his name into a simple wooden marker, her hands trembling with every stroke, while Jack dug the grave, his quiet strength a balm to her shattered spirit. The calf Ash had saved, now grazing nearby, seemed an unwitting monument to his final act of sacrifice. Devastation clung to Ashley in the days that followed, a weight heavier than any she'd borne before. The ranch, once a symbol of their shared dream, felt emptier without his gruff voice calling out tasks or his steady presence at the supper table. She wandered the fields aimlessly at first, the locket at her throat a constant reminder of the family she'd lost twice over. Yet, in the midst of her sorrow, Ash's last words echoed, his pride in her strength, his charge to carry on. They became a lifeline, a resolve that hardened within her. She would honor him not by crumbling, but by building on what he'd started. With Jack's unwavering support, Ashley returned to the work of Golden Plains, her hands blistered but determined as they mended fences and tended the herd. Each task was a tribute to Ash, a way to keep his spirit alive in the soil they'd tamed together. The pain of his passing would never fully fade, but it fueled her purpose, a legacy of love and perseverance etched into every acre. Ash Norman had given her a name, a past, and a future, and though his farewell tore her apart, it also forged her anew, resolute to make Golden Plains a testament to the father who had fought so hard to reclaim her, and to the boundless love he'd poured out until his last breath. Chapter 13. A Legacy to Build. The months following Ash's death draped Golden Plains in a quiet mourning, but Ashley refused to let grief define the ranch her father had poured his final strength into. With the deed now solely in her name, the weight of responsibility settled squarely on her shoulders, a legacy she was determined to honor. The Oklahoma land, with its untamed beauty and relentless demands, became both her challenge and her sanctuary. She woke each dawn with a renewed sense of purpose, her hands calloused from labor, her heart steeled by the memory of Ash's last words to carry on. Jack Morgan, ever the steadfast presence at her side, proved to be more than a hired hand. He was her anchor, his quiet strength a constant reminder that she wasn't alone in this endeavor. Together, Ashley and Jack set about transforming Golden Plains into a thriving operation. They started small, focusing on the basics, reinforcing the barn to withstand the fierce storms that swept through the plains, expanding the grazing pastures by clearing stubborn brush, and investing their modest savings into a few more head of cattle. Jack's knack for livestock shone as he trained the herd, while Ashley took on the bookkeeping, her sharp mind tracking every expense and sale with a precision that would have made Ash proud. Their days were long, often stretching into the night as they repaired fences under lantern light or planned the next season's goals over cups of bitter coffee on the porch. Slowly their efforts bore fruit. Cattle sales brought in steady profits, enough to hire a couple of local hands, and the ranch began to hum with life. Amidst this toil, something deeper blossomed between Ashley and Jack. It began subtly in shared glances across the fields and the way their hands lingered when passing tools. One evening, as a crimson sunset painted the horizon, Jack sat beside her on the porch steps, his hat in his hands, his voice low and earnest. "I've been thinking, Ashley," he said, his eyes meeting hers with a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. "This place, this life, it ain't just work to me. It's home, 'cause of you. I love you, have for a while now, and I'd like to stand by you, not just as a partner in the ranch, but in everything." Her heart, so long guarded by loss, opened at his words. She reached for his hand, her own trembling slightly, and whispered, "I love you too, Jack. I've been scared to say it, but I do." Their bond, forged in shared struggle, became a quiet promise of a future together, a new layer to the family they were building on this land. Seeking guidance to ensure the ranch's success, Ashley turned to the wisdom of those who had shaped her. She wrote to William and Lily back in Boston, pouring out her plans and fears in long letters, and made the journey to visit them when the first big cattle sale gave her the means. William, now softer around the edges with Lily by his side, welcomed her with a gruff embrace, while Lily's warm smile felt like coming home. Over cups of tea in their familiar kitchen, they offered hard-earned advice. William on negotiating with cattle buyers, warning her of common pitfalls, and Lily on managing a household under strain, reminding her to care for herself as much as the land. "You've got your pa's grit, Ashley," William said, his voice thick with pride, "and your own heart. Don't forget that. Build something lasting for all of you." Their counsel, paired with stories of their own happiness, Samuel and Hannah thriving, their farm steady, gave Ashley a blueprint for balancing ambition with the warmth of family. Back at Golden Plains, Ashley's growth into a capable, independent woman became undeniable. She stood taller, her decisions firm as she haggled at market or directed the ranch hands with a quiet authority. She learned to read the land's moods, the subtle signs of an approaching drought, the best spots for new wells, and adapted with a resilience honed by years of hardship. Jack complimented her, his steady presence a counterpoint to her drive, and together they turned challenges into triumphs. The ranch flourished, its herd doubling, its name whispered with respect among local traders. Ashley even planted a small orchard near the farmhouse, a nod to her early garden, its budding trees a symbol of roots taking hold. Surrounded by a makeshift family, Ashley found a measure of happiness and peace she'd once thought impossible. Jack, now her partner in every sense, brought laughter back into her days, their evenings filled with quiet talks of dreams beyond the ranch, perhaps children, a legacy of their own. The hired hands, rough but loyal, became like brothers, sharing meals and stories around a crackling fire. Letters from William and Lily, often enclosing drawings from Samuel and Hannah, kept her tied to her past, while visits from neighboring ranchers wove her into a broader community. Even the land itself seemed to embrace her, its golden fields and endless skies a canvas for the life she was painting, stroke by determined stroke. As autumn painted the plains in shades of amber and rust, Ashley stood on the rise where Ash was buried, the oak above his grave a silent guardian. She traced the carved letters of his name, her locket warm against her chest, and felt the weight of her journey, from the gray walls of St. Mary's to the courtroom reunion, through loss after loss, to this moment of hard-won stability. "We're building it, Pa," she murmured, her voice steady despite the ache. "A legacy like you wanted. I hope you see it." The wind carried her words across the ranch, over the grazing cattle and the sturdy farmhouse, a testament to her strength and the family, blood and chosen, that surrounded her. Golden Plains was no longer just a dream. It was a living monument to all she'd endured and overcome, a place where happiness, though scarred, had finally taken root. Chapter 14. Roots and Promises. The sun hung low over the rolling hills of the ranch, casting a golden glow across the fields where cattle grazed contentedly. Ashley stood on the porch of the old farmhouse, her hands wrapped around a chipped ceramic mug of coffee, the steam curling into the crisp morning air. She gazed out at the land, her land now, though it still felt like a dream she might wake from. The ranch had come alive under her care, its once wild acres tamed into something thriving, something hers. But as she watched the horizon, her thoughts drifted inward, tracing the long, jagged path that had brought her here. She could still remember the hollow ache of being a frightened orphan, alone in a world that seemed too big and too cruel. The memory of her father, Ash, was a flickering light in those dark years, a man of grit and dreams who had spoken of this very land with a fire in his eyes. She had clung to his stories like a lifeline, even when she couldn't fully understand them. Now, standing on the soil he'd once walked, she felt the weight of his absence and the strength of his legacy. Every hardship, the endless days of toil, the nights of doubt, the bone-deep exhaustion, had carved her into the woman she was now. She wasn't that scared girl anymore. She was a force, rooted deep in this earth, unyielding as the ancient oaks that lined the property. The sound of boots crunching on gravel pulled her from her reverie. Jack approached, his hat tipped back, a faint smile playing on his lips as he caught her lost in thought. He leaned against the porch railing beside her, his presence steady and warm, a quiet anchor in the storm of her memories. They had built this life together, side by side, through sweat and struggle, and somewhere along the way their partnership had grown into something deeper, something unspoken but undeniable. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, his voice low, teasing but gentle. Ashley smiled, her gaze still fixed on the horizon. Just thinking about how far I've come, about my father, about all of it. I never thought I'd have this, any of this. The ranch, the peace, you. She turned to him then, her eyes soft but fierce with gratitude. I owe so much to the hard times. They broke me down, but they built me back up stronger. I want to make sure this place stands as a promise to Ash, to everything he dreamed of. I want it to last. Jack nodded, his expression serious now, understanding the weight of her words. It will last, Ashley. You've poured your soul into this land. It's not just a ranch. It's a legacy, and I'm here to help you carry it, if you'll have me. Her heart stuttered at the quiet intensity in his voice. They had danced around the future before, in fleeting glances and half-spoken dreams, but there was something different in his tone now, something resolute. She set her mug down on the railing and faced him fully, searching his eyes. What are you saying, Jack? He took a breath as if steadying himself, then reached for her hand, his calloused fingers rough but tender against hers. I'm saying I want a life with you, Ashley, not just as partners in this ranch, but as something more. I want to marry you, if you'll have me. I want to build a family here, on this land, with you. I want to see our children grow up running through these fields, knowing the stories of your father, knowing what you fought for. I want to make those promises with you, for keeps. The words settled over her like a warm blanket, filling the empty spaces she hadn't even realized were still there. Marriage, a family, a future stretching out before them, rooted in the soil her father had loved. She thought of Ash, of how he'd smile to see her now, not just surviving, but thriving, building something lasting. Tears pricked at her eyes, but they were tears of joy, of a gratitude so deep it ached. She squeezed Jack's hand, her voice steady despite the emotion swelling in her chest. Yes, Jack, I want that too. I want all of it with you. They stood there for a long moment, hands clasped, the world around them quiet save for the distant lowing of cattle and the rustle of leaves in the breeze. Ashley felt a profound sense of peace, a certainty that this was where she was meant to be. The ranch wasn't just a place. It was a testament to her resilience, to her father's dreams, to the love she and Jack would nurture here. She thought of the hardships again, the endless challenges that had tested her spirit, and she felt no bitterness, only thanks. They had shaped her, yes, but they had also led her to this moment, to this man, to this promise of tomorrow. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in hues of amber and crimson, Ashley leaned into Jack, her head resting against his shoulder. They didn't need to speak. The silence between them was enough, filled with unspoken vows and shared dreams. She knew there would be more struggles ahead. Life on the ranch was never easy, but she also knew she wouldn't face them alone. Together, they would honor Ash's memory, not just by keeping the ranch alive, but by filling it with laughter, with love, with a family of their own. This land, her father's dream, would be their legacy too, a root deep in the earth, a promise reaching toward the sky. Chapter 15. A Horizon of Hope. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the sprawling ranch, bathing the Oklahoma plains in a warm, amber light. The air was thick with the scent of freshly harvested wheat and the faint tang of barbecue smoke drifting from the pit near the barn. Laughter and chatter filled the space as William, Lily, and their extended family gathered alongside Ashley and Jack to celebrate the season's bounty. Long wooden tables were laden with platters of food, corn on the cob, homemade biscuits, and slices of pie that glistened with sugar and fruit. Children darted between the adults, their squeals of delight mingling with the strum of a guitar someone had pulled out for an impromptu song. Ashley stood near the edge of the gathering, a glass of sweet tea in her hand, watching the scene unfold with a quiet smile. Jack was at the center of a small group, recounting a story about a stubborn tractor that had nearly derailed the harvest, his animated gestures drawing hearty laughs from William and the others. Lily, ever the gracious host, moved from table to table, ensuring everyone had enough to eat and drink, her face radiant with the joy of togetherness. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated connection, a stark contrast to the solitary struggles Ashley had known for so long. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in hues of pink and lavender, Ashley wandered a little farther from the crowd, her boots crunching against the dry grass. She stopped at a rise overlooking the vast plains, the horizon stretching endlessly before her. The wind tugged gently at her hair, carrying with it a sense of release, as if it were sweeping away the last remnants of her past. She thought of the early days, the raw ache of loss, the weight of mistakes, and the long, lonely nights when hope seemed like a distant star. Those memories no longer held her captive. They were part of her story, yes, but they were not the whole of it. Behind her, Jack's voice called out, soft but clear. "Thought I'd find you here." He joined her on the rise, his presence steady and familiar. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, taking in the view together. Then he spoke again, his tone thoughtful. "You've come a long way, Ash. We all have." She nodded, her gaze still fixed on the horizon. "I used to think I'd never belong anywhere, that I'd always be running from something, or to something I couldn't name, but this—" She gestured to the land, the people, the life they'd built. "This feels like home. Not just the ranch, but the way we've held each other up, the way we've kept going, no matter what." Jack placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of quiet understanding. "That's what family does. Blood or not, we're in this together. Always will be." As the first stars began to peek through the twilight, they returned to the celebration. The guitar had been joined by a fiddle, and a few folks had started dancing in the open space near the barn. William caught Ashley's eye and waved her over, his grin wide as he pulled Lily into a clumsy two-step. Ashley laughed, the sound lighter than it had been in years, and joined them, letting the music and the moment carry her. Later, as the night deepened and the crowd began to thin, Ashley sat with Lily on the porch, a quilt draped over their shoulders against the cool air. They shared stories, some funny, some poignant, of the harvest, of the years that had shaped them, of the dreams they still held close. Lily's voice was soft as she said, "I'm proud of you, Ashley, for fighting for this life, for choosing to stay, even when it was hard." Ashley felt a lump rise in her throat, but she swallowed it down, offering a small smile. "I couldn't have done it without you, without all of you. I've learned that redemption isn't just about fixing what's broken. It's about building something new, something worth holding on to." As the last of the guests said their goodbyes and the ranch settled into a peaceful quiet, Ashley took one final look at the plains under the moonlight. The weight of her past had lifted, replaced by a boundless sense of possibility. She knew there would be challenges ahead. Life on the land always held its uncertainties, but she also knew she wouldn't face them alone. With resilience forged through hardship, love that had weathered every storm, and a family that had become her anchor, Ashley stepped into her future, her heart full of hope. The horizon, once a distant line she could never quite reach, now felt like a promise. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss out on more captivating tales. Until next time, take care, stay safe, and God bless. See you in the next video.